How do everybody? So I've got quite a good story here, which is very interesting. I think just further exemplifies really just how much the British state does actually hate the indigenous population. After all of the sort of crimes that we've been experiencing and have been back in the news again, things like the Pakistani rape gangs, also the Axel Radicabana case, which has been an absolute S show from start to finish with the attempt of covering it up and lying to our faces about it. Well, it turns out that a leaked draft of new a new report from the Home Office is basically trying to say that everything is far right. So noticing these crimes is effectively going to be far right. Claiming that's two-tiered justice is far right. It's even going to be claimed that it's going to be far right just for basically being white at some point. So don't be surprised if that comes out. So we'll get on with this story. I'm going to link this into another story that's just happened in Scotland too, with sentencing of a gang of nonces from Glasgow. I've done a video on it previously. White people, but like the treatment that they're getting compared to what Pakistani rapists have got, it just again exemplifies the difference in treatment that we see in our country. But that is far right for noticing that people. So I mean, at the end of the day, now everything's far right. And I suppose if everything's far right, nothing's far right. So maybe we should all start Zeke Highland, I suppose, and embrace the far right. Because that's the point it's getting to now. Simply, breathing's going to be far right in the not too distant future. Right, let's get on with this story anyway for the Mail Online. As I always say, I will link these stories below, and I'll see about linking that video in for you so you can see the horrors of that crime. And by the way, I'm not saying that those people shouldn't get the sentencing. You will hear about the sentencing later. I'm not saying that they shouldn't get the sentencing that they get in. I think they should be hung, personally. Right, but the problem is that they're getting far worse sentences compared to what brown people get for comparably evil crimes. We can see this. It's glaring us in the face, the actual difference in treatment. But then we're told that we're far right for noticing it. It's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating. And the only summary I can come to in my own mind is that the institutions of this country actually hate us. They actually hate us. For what reasons, I don't know. What they're trying to do, I don't know. But that's how it comes across in my mind anyway. So let's get on with this story. Now criticising two-tier policing can make example of far-right extremism, leaked Home Office report claims. Fears over two-tier policing are an extreme right-wing narrative, a leaked Home Office report claims. Yeah, so when you do actually see the police engaging in a different treatment of different groups of people, whether that be the police taking the knee for Black Lives Matter whilst getting the batons out for people who were a bit upset about lockdown, we did actually see that happening. When Sarah Everard was murdered and people were holding vigils and they were getting arrested, whereas Just Stop Oil could go out and glue themselves to motorways and things like that, and they were treated like royalty. Just don't believe your lying eyes, people. You're just imagining this stuff. When we actually have a news article from The Guardian from I think it was 2013, where a judge actually said in court that Asian victims of rape should be treated more seriously than white victims of rape for cultural sensitivity reasons. Ignore that, people. I'll link that one below as well, by the way. Ignore that. That's your lying eyes and your lying ears. It's the institutions, although they're saying that different groups should be treated differently and other groups should get preferential treatment or more serious treatment because of cultural reasons or skin colour reasons or whatever reasons that they want to come out with, whatever BS arguments they make for it. Ignore all of that because you're actually not understanding them. You're not understanding them, people. You're just stupid plebs. You must be thick because you're probably white. So you're a racist and far right, so just ignore all that. So anyway, the major review of extremism also says grooming gangs, referred to as alleged group-based sexual abuse, are an issue exploited by the far right to stir hatred against Muslims. The report urged ministers to increase police use of controversial non-crime hate incidents. So that is like Stasi-style spying on the population and building lists of people and getting enough evidence against people to say you haven't committed a crime, but we don't like you as a person, so we're going to lock you away for engaging in unfavourable behaviour that we just frown upon but isn't illegal. That's what non-crime hate incident means. Stasi behaviour, literally Stasi behaviour. Not like the Stasi. It is exactly the same as what the Stasi used to do. Exactly the same as what the KGB used to do. Exactly the same as what the Cheka used to do. Building lists of people's behaviour that they don't like but isn't illegal. And they can't outright arrest you for it at that moment in time, but they will get you at some point in the future with it. to tackle online abuse of MPs, sparking concerns over freedom of speech. It's beyond freedom of speech. It's just draconian is what it is. The rabid analytical sprint launched by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper in the wake of the Southport killings and the riots that sparked last summer also proposes a new approach to counter extremism based on people's actions and the harm they cause rather than the ideologies to which they subscribe. So what's happened here is we've had a disgruntled person who's of immigrant background, although he was born in the UK. His parents were supposedly refugees into this country. A man who's obviously got very, very dark skin because he's of African descent, has gone on a mad killing spree in Southport. And it's only because of the miracle of modern science, by the way, modern medicine, that it wasn't 15 people murdered that day. So 3 people were murdered that day. 8 children were also slashed up and 2 or 3 adults. You know, all of those other people who were slashed up should have died as well. And it's only because of the miracle. And I'm not even talking about like the last 20 years of modern surgery. We're talking like surgery has come on in the last couple of years so much that those people survived. Like those people were so badly cut up, so badly stabbed that even 5 years ago, most of those people would have died. That's how serious that crime was. But the problem here is people noticing that. The people here is people complaining about it and getting upset about it. That's the real problem. And that's why they allowed the Pakistani rape gangs to get away with what they did for so many years. Because they were more concerned about people noticing and getting upset about it than they were about little children getting raped. This is exactly how these people think. Their ideology is more important to them than your children and your personal safety. That's all that matters to these people is the ideology. That is their religion. And this is what you need to understand about these people. They're dangerous. Very, very dangerous. This is like that. This is what justified the communists send people off to the gulags. You know, murder millions of people. Literally tens and tens of millions. Communism killed about 100 million people in the 20th century. Because it was all ideologically driven. And when you're driven by ideology, you can kill anybody and you'll sleep like a baby after it. Because the ends justify the means. It says there is now a more diverse range of extremist beliefs ranging from anarchists and environmental protesters to those obsessed by school massacres and our online subculture of misogynists called the manosphere. Well, data has been released actually very recently. Since 1999, I believe it's 85% of all terrorist attacks been committed in the UK, been committed by Islamists, with I think it was 90 to 95% of all victims of terrorism in the UK being victims of Islamist terrorism. So I'm afraid what they're doing here is they are massively disproportionately targeting the entirety of society because of a very, very small group of terrorists. But they are trying to gaslight us into thinking that it is wider society that's equally, or if not more of a problem than a very, very small group of... And it's not even all Muslims, by the way. It's not even all Pakistanis. It's a very, very small group of the people from those communities that are causing these problems. But rather than facing the problem head on, they rather blame everybody else and gaslight us all because that's how important their ideology is to them. They can't let go of this now, unfortunately, for these people. They are too deep into it, up to the necks. But experts at the Policy Exchange think tank, who were shown a copy of the unpublished Home Office document, say this means downplaying the risk posed by radical Islamism and overwhelming the prevent teams who try to stop those who have been radicalised turning to terrorism. Well, let's be honest. Like Axel Radicabana had been to prevent 3 times. That's correct, 3 times they did nothing. And the guy who was on, I think it was the London Bridge stabbing, where they ended up getting him with a narwhal tusk, I think it was. He'd been through prevent. And the reason why he was in London before he committed that terrorist attack was to celebrate the fact that he'd been de-radicalised by Prevent. And he then went on to kill the people who de-radicalised him, allegedly. And the tragedy of that was the guy's father, who was murdered, said, oh, you know, we can't get mad about this and Prevent's still good, blah, blah. You know, his own son had been murdered. The actual failure of the Prevent scheme was there, but his face was being rubbed in it. And even then he still had the blinkers on. The ideological... These people are so crazy. They are... It's like... I think it was Yuri Bezmenov said, the actual boot, words to the effect of, when people are so demoralised, the actual boot of the oppressor could be coming down on the face, and even then they won't believe the evidence in front of their eyes that they're being oppressed because they're so far gone. Dangerous, dangerous people. Dangerous people. Authors of the report, Paul Scott and Andrew Gilligan, said last night, many of these supposed other extremism simply do not meet the test of harming national security or safety. Governments should certainly be alarmed by and should tackle violence against women and other social harms, but they do not constitute extremism as defined. I mean, like even that, and I'm not trying to say that violence against women isn't a problem, but there's this like obsession, like women are like the primary victims of violence in the UK. Men are 9 times more likely to be 9 out of 10 assaults against men. You know, men are like 99% of all murder victims as well. You know, like Or if you want to talk about assault and violence, and especially random attacks as well, like me as a man, I'm nearly 10 times more likely to get assaulted than a woman, whether it's by somebody that I know or by a stranger. You know, just for walking down the street minding my own business. But they always make it about women, and I'm not saying that women shouldn't feel that they don't need protection. Obviously they do. Women are obviously easier targets than men. But at the end of the day, this whole thing about making it all about women, again, it's like gaslighting us about the reality of the world. You know, it's just rhetoric over reality, and it's dangerous. These people are lunatics. So this new approach where it's swamping already stretched counter-extremism interveners and counter-terror police with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of new cases, making it more likely that dangerous people will be missed. That's also true as well. You know, it's one of the reasons, slightly different, but the exact same reasoning. It's why the Americans opened up the internet to the world. Because if the internet was the theory being, if the internet was a closed circuit, it'd be very easy for the Soviets to have broken into it and listened in. But by opening it to the entire world, effectively what it did at that time of history, the theory was it was the American secret communications that would have been happening on the internet would have been drowned out by the massive traffic. You know, there's too much there to deal with. With the same with this. It's the exact same sort of thing. You know, it's just it becomes a cascade. It's like an avalanche. Some of the definitions of extremism also threaten free speech, but we don't have free speech in this country. So that's just I'm saying that's a fact. We don't actually have free speech in the UK. They talk about it like we do, but we actually do not have free speech in the country. The fact that we have hate speech laws proves that, by the way. Defining aspects of normal and legitimate political debate as extremist. And Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillips said, "I'm appalled that the government is once again smearing as far right those who raise concerns about young girls being gang raped." Fully agree with that sentiment. Absolutely agree with that. If me being concerned about little girls being gang raped and drugged and prostituted and pimped and trafficked around the country and sometimes being turned into kebab meat, and the police and councils and social workers and counsellors and all those other people covering it up, if me being concerned about that actually happening makes me far right, then I'm going to embrace it. You know, why wouldn't you embrace being far right? If being concerned about the safety of little girls, vulnerable little girls, is far right, then what makes you far left? Is it the opposite? Is it being concerned about the rapists? Is it wanting those little girls to get raped? That's the questions that should be getting asked here. What makes you far left then, if that makes you far right? If wanting to get equal treatment in court makes you far right, then what's far left? Different treatment in court? A tiered system in court? Two-tiered system possibly in court? You know, these are questions that people really need to be asking. The leaked review admits counter-extremism has long been a tricky policy challenge for government. But it's not a tricky policy at all. It's just look at the data, who's causing the problems, target those people. And if the numbers go down there and they increase somewhere else, or another portion just becomes disproportionately larger because you've shrunk the original larger problem, then focus onto that one instead. You just go to wherever the problems are and just keep moving around. It's not complicated. That's just BS excuse making, because these people are ideologically driven and they don't want to admit to the failures and the fact that they're ideologically driven. They're just trying. It's like a magician. Look at the left hand. Look at the left hand. Look at the left hand. When the trick's really happening with the right hand. That's what they're doing. It states the range of extremist beliefs and ideologies individuals subscribe to is becoming more diverse, from right-wing to Islamist extremism to extreme misogyny to left-wing anarchist and single-issue extremism. None of that is new. And a lot of that is massively overinflated. Like, yeah, there are extreme misogynists out there, but you can count them on one hand. Like, they are not a threat to society. They are not. Yes, one of them may go out and commit a horrendous crime. Absolutely watch them. Just like if you have somebody who's a habitual thief, you watch them, monitor them, and then arrest them and hopefully before they commit a crime. You know, I'm not saying that these people, but to try and conflate them with the rape gangs is just insane and insulting to us as a society. And again, if that makes me far right saying that, I'll embrace that. I will embrace that, and then I will vote accordingly in future, because clearly anybody else that they must call far right must actually be reasonable in the thinking. They must be, you know, because if they're calling various parties far right, well, what is far right? Being concerned about little girls being raped, being concerned about equal treatment under the law, being concerned about mass immigration. Well, why would I not vote far right then if they're going to call me far right? This is what these people need to be careful of, because that's what's going to end up happening. Additionally, school massacre and online gore subculture and conspiracy theories, while not ideologies, can lead to harmful fixations on violence. The claims in the document, written in November, was backed by Sir Keir. Well, obviously, it was backed by Sir Keir Starmer last week when he warned of a new threat because he's trying to distract from his massive failures. Because the guy is about as much use as breaths on a fish. Extreme violence from loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom. Loners, misfits, and young men in their... So basically, he's acting like a high school bully here. Oh, you're a loser, so we're gonna ostracize. That's people's kids that he's talking about. You don't stop them being extremists by calling them loners, misfits, and young men. I mean, just young men. I mean, by the way, these have got commas after them, so it's loners, comma, misfits, comma, and then young men. As in, that is a category on its own. Just young men in their bedroom. Like, if you're a young man and you're just sat in your bedroom, apparently the British government thinks you're an extremist just for being sat in your bedroom, playing on your PlayStation or whatever it is that you do. You can't... beggars belief. It actually beggars belief. Beggars belief, man. I'm going to leave this story here. Obviously, go read the rest of it yourself. But what I'll do is I'm going to get on to that other story that I'm going to show you about. Now, we've all heard about, obviously, the rape gangs. And they get out after about 10 years. You know, like some of them who got sentenced in the early sort of 2010s, like 2008, they're walking on the streets again. These people have committed barbaric crimes, and some of those crimes I actually read in an earlier video. They're horrific. They're walking the streets. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this here. I'm just going to read you the first couple of lines on it. So the Glasgow child sex abuse gang given life sentences. This is from BBC News. Again, I'll put the link below. 7 members of one of Scotland's biggest child sex abuse rings have been given lifelong sentences and warned they may never be released. They may never be released. Now, why are these people being told they may never be released, but when brown people commit comparable crimes, they're out after about 10 to 15 years? Why is that? Why is that? That's a serious question. Now, me asking that question, according to that government report that's not been officially published, that makes me a right-wing extremist. Why? Why am I a right-wing extremist for rightly pointing out an obvious hypocrisy of two-tier justice in our country? Now, it could be that it's because they've been sentenced in Scotland and the Pakistani rape gangs have been sentenced in England. But I don't buy that. I don't buy that for 1 second. Purely, and it is just my own gut feeling, but purely because of my own gut feeling on that. Now, I'm not going to read the one from The Guardian, as I said, about treating different rape victims from different ethnicities differently, but again, I will link that down below. And that is obviously from around 2013, so it's a bit of an older article, but it's not so old that it can be discounted. You know, those sorts of rulings are still precedents. You know, that's very, and again, it just tells you that was before. That was when all this sort of two-tiered stuff was still only just starting to come out. Whereas people like me have been saying it for years. But wider society was only just starting to become aware of it. And now people are having their faces rubbed in it. It's unavoidable now. And, oh, by the way, over the next 7 years, we can expect another 5 million people in the country. So this ain't going to get better anytime soon. Because Keir Starmer ain't going to stop that. Not for a second. And although Reform may get into power, and they may put the brakes on it, they ain't going to reverse it either. So we're in for an interesting time in the future. I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching. If you've found that informative, useful, any of that good stuff, please do like, subscribe, definitely put comments below. I love reading your comments. Do read these stories yourself and make your own minds up. Thank you very much for your time. Take care and goodbye.